The house was silent except for the faint hum of the baby monitor on the nightstand. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone with one ear always tuned to that little box. The red lights flickered softly in rhythm with the faint static. Her newborn daughter, Lily, had finally settled into sleep after a difficult evening of fussing. Exhausted, Emily leaned back against the headboard, convincing herself she had earned just a few minutes of rest. But the silence felt heavier than usual tonight, as though the air in the house was holding its breath. It started with a soft sound through the monitor, something like a whisper, though too distorted to make out. Emily froze, her thumb hovering over her phone screen. She listened closer, her chest tightening. At first, she thought it might just be interference. Baby monitors often picked up stray radio signals from neighbors. But then, underneath the faint hiss of static, came something unmistakable, the sound of a woman's voice. It was low, almost melodic, as though someone were softly humming a lullaby. Emily's heart pounded. She threw the blanket off her legs and leaned toward the monitor, her eyes locked on the glowing lights. The humming grew clearer, now layered with soft words she couldn't quite decipher. She tried to rationalize, maybe Lily's nightlight had some kind of music setting she'd accidentally turned on. But no, that wasn't it. She knew every sound in that nursery, and this voice didn't belong to any machine. She grabbed the monitor and pressed the volume up, wincing as the whispering filled the room. The rational part of her screamed to ignore it, that this was nothing more than faulty electronics. But instinct clawed at her, telling her that something, or someone, was in Lily's room. She moved quickly, pushing herself off the bed and padding down the hallway. The wooden floor creaked under her bare feet, each step sending a new wave of dread through her chest. The closer she got to the nursery, the more the air seemed to thicken, as though the entire house was aware of her movements. When she finally reached Lily's door, Emily paused. Her trembling hand rested on the doorknob, listening. The monitor in her hand still buzzed faintly, but she could no longer hear the voice through the crack in the door. She pressed her ear against it, nothing. Summoning her courage, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. The nightlight bathed the room in a dim, orange glow. Lily was still in her crib, sound asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. But Emily's eyes widened in horror when she noticed the rocking chair in the corner. It was moving, back and forth, slowly, as though someone had just gotten up from it. Emily's breath caught as she stared at the rocking chair. It swayed gently, creaking in a rhythm that didn't match the stillness of the room. She clutched the baby monitor tighter, the plastic casing slick with sweat from her palm. For a moment, she tried to convince herself it was nothing, a draft, maybe, or the vibrations from her own footsteps. But the window was shut tight, and the air in the nursery was stiflingly still. Her pulse thudded in her ears, and yet Lily remained undisturbed, oblivious to the unease wrapping itself around the room. Slowly, Emily stepped inside, forcing herself forward. Her eyes scanned the corners of the nursery, darting from the crib to the closet door, then to the pale curtain swaying slightly as though touched by an invisible hand. The rocking chair groaned one last time before it stilled completely, stopping so abruptly it felt deliberate, as though the unseen presence had realized it was being watched. Emily's throat tightened, and she swallowed the lump that had formed there. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, though the words sounded hollow against the silence. She crouched beside Lily's crib, brushing a soft curl from her daughter's forehead. Relief swelled inside her at the sight of the baby's calm breathing. Still, the unease lingered. The monitor, now silent, suddenly felt like a false sense of security, as if it had been luring her here rather than warning her. She stood again, her gaze drifting once more toward the chair. It was just a piece of furniture, she told herself. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been sitting there, watching her child. Just as she turned to leave the nursery, a sound broke the silence. It wasn't coming from the monitor this time, but from the very corner of the room. It was faint, almost like the brush of fabric against fabric, a shifting, dragging sound. Emily froze, her body tense, her eyes flicking toward the closet. The door stood slightly ajar, no more than a finger's width, though she was certain she had closed it earlier. The sound stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving the room in a silence so sharp it made her ears ring. Her instinct screamed to take Lily and leave, but her rational mind fought back, desperate to cling to some explanation that wasn't supernatural. With trembling hands, she reached for the closet door. For a moment, she hovered there, her fingertips brushing the cool wood. Every fiber of her being told her not to open it, not to look. And yet, the silence pressed down on her so heavily that doing nothing felt even worse. Emily drew in a shaky breath, pushed the door open wider, and gasped when she saw what was inside. The closet door creaked open with a slow groan, the hinges resisting as though reluctant to reveal what was hidden inside. Emily's breath hitched as she peered into the darkness. At first, it looked empty, just a small collection of Lily's baby clothes hanging neatly and a stack of folded blankets on the shelf. But then her eyes caught something at the bottom, an indentation on the carpet, faint yet undeniable, as if something heavy had been resting there. The air smelled faintly of dust and something else, something damp and metallic that made her stomach churn. She crouched lower, her trembling fingers brushing against the closet floor. The carpet felt warm. Her heart skipped a beat. Why would the carpet inside a dark closet hold warmth, as if someone had just been sitting there? Emily pulled back quickly, wiping her hand on her pajama pants as if she'd touched something contaminated. She stood abruptly, her head hitting one of the low-hanging coats, making her flinch violently. The sudden movement sent her pulse racing, and she slammed the closet door shut with more force than she intended. Trying to steady her breathing, she turned back to Lily. The baby slept soundly, blissfully unaware of the tension choking the room. For a fleeting moment, Emily considered scooping her up and leaving the house entirely. But her exhaustion and fear twisted together, convincing her to stay. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe her sleep-deprived mind was inventing horrors in the shadows. She backed away from the crib, whispering a shaky, "You're okay, baby girl, you're okay." As she reached the doorway, the baby monitor in her hand crackled suddenly, making her jump. This time, there was no voice, no humming, just static at first. But then, faintly, came the sound of breathing. Slow, heavy, deliberate breathing, like someone was holding the monitor's speaker close to their mouth. Emily's blood ran cold. She whipped her head around, scanning the nursery again, but no one was there. Lily shifted in her sleep, letting out a soft sigh, while the sound on the monitor continued steadily, matching no one in the room. Emily's hand shook violently as she lowered the monitor, staring at it as though it were a living thing. Every instinct screamed at her to smash it against the floor, to destroy the device that had become a conduit for something she couldn't understand. But she couldn't move. She could only listen as the breathing on the monitor shifted into something worse, a low, gravelly chuckle that sent icy terror down her spine. Emily stumbled backward into the hallway, her grip on the monitor so tight that her knuckles turned white. The distorted chuckle still rasped through its tiny speaker, low and deliberate, as though whoever, or whatever, was on the other end knew she was listening. She slapped at the buttons, desperately trying to turn it off, but nothing worked. The volume wheel spun uselessly, the power button refused to respond. The sound continued, steady and taunting. It was as if the device had been hijacked by something beyond her understanding. Her mind raced for explanations. Could it be some stranger, a sick person who'd hacked into the frequency? She had read stories of monitors picking up interference, even broadcasts from nearby radios. But this didn't sound like a radio signal, it sounded alive, intentional. The idea that someone could be outside her home, listening in, watching her baby, twisted her stomach into knots. She rushed back into the nursery and set the monitor on the dresser, staring at it as though distance might make it less terrifying. The chuckle faded into silence, leaving only the hiss of static. Suddenly, the monitor picked up something else, a voice, faint but clear enough to freeze her blood. "Shoo," it whispered, soft and gentle, the exact way she soothed Lily when she cried. Emily's mouth went dry. That wasn't her voice, yet it mirrored her tone perfectly, an uncanny imitation that made her skin crawl. Her eyes darted to the crib, terrified of what she might see. Lily stirred slightly but didn't wake, her tiny body shifting under the blanket. Emily's hands trembled as she reached down to lift her daughter. Every instinct screamed to take the baby and run, to get out of this house no matter the hour, no matter the cold night outside. She scooped Lily up, cradling her against her chest, and backed toward the hallway. The monitor on the dresser crackled again, this time louder, more insistent. Then, through the static, came the same whispering voice, but now it was repeating a single word over and over: "Stay, stay, stay." Emily's heart hammered so hard she thought she might collapse. She clutched Lily tighter and stumbled into the hall, nearly tripping over her own feet. The house around her felt alien, hostile. Shadows clung to the corners of the ceiling, and every creak of the floor sounded like footsteps that weren't hers. The voice from the nursery monitor grew louder as though it was following her, even though she'd left it behind. Each "stay" echoed in her ears, reverberating inside her skull until she thought she might lose her mind. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the voice stopped. Emily hurried down the hallway, her arms wrapped protectively around Lily. Every nerve in her body screamed for escape, but she hesitated at the top of the stairs. The front door seemed impossibly far away, swallowed in darkness that felt thicker than it should have been. The house, once familiar and comforting, now pressed in on her from all sides, the creaks and groans of the old wood sounding like whispers just beneath hearing. She whispered to herself, "It's just the monitor, just interference, just a bad dream." But the lie didn't stick. Lily shifted in her arms, letting out a soft, almost whimpering cry. Emily kissed her forehead, rocking her slightly, desperate to keep her calm. That's when she noticed it. The air had grown colder, enough to prickle her skin and cloud her breath. Her heartbeat spiked. She glanced toward the staircase, and for just a split second, she thought she saw movement at the bottom, the faint outline of a figure standing perfectly still in the shadows. Her stomach dropped. She blinked, and it was gone. The monitor's voice returned. Only now, it wasn't confined to the nursery. The sound echoed faintly throughout the house, as though multiple devices had switched on at once. The whisper carried from the walls, the floors, even the air itself: "Stay, stay, stay." The words seemed to slither closer, wrapping around her like a net. Emily's grip on Lily tightened until the baby squirmed in discomfort. She forced her feet forward, making her way down the stairs as carefully as she could, though each step groaned louder than the last, betraying her movement. Halfway down, the baby monitor she thought she'd left behind suddenly appeared on the landing, resting neatly on the step, its tiny red light glowing in the dark. Emily froze, bile rising in her throat. She had left it on the nursery dresser. She was certain of it. Yet here it sat, waiting, as if someone had carefully placed it there for her to find. She edged around it, every muscle tense, refusing to touch it. Lily began to cry in earnest now, her wails cutting through the suffocating silence. Emily reached the bottom of the stairs and rushed to the front door, her hands fumbling desperately with the lock. Behind her, the monitor on the stairs crackled to life again, the chuckle louder this time, clearer, as if whoever was speaking was no longer distant but standing right there. And then, layered beneath the chuckle, came words that turned her blood to ice: "She's not yours." Emily's hands fumbled wildly with the lock. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, the kind that left her chest burning. She twisted and yanked until finally the deadbolt gave way. With one hand clutching Lily and the other gripping the doorknob, she pulled hard. But the door didn't move. She tried again, putting her full weight into it. Still nothing. It was as though the wood had fused into the frame, sealing her inside. The air grew heavier, pressing against her ribs until every breath felt stolen. Behind her, the monitor's voice rose into a mocking sing-song. "Shoo, Esevich, Esevich." It sounded closer, no longer confined to the stairway. Emily spun around, her back pressed against the immovable door. At the far end of the hallway, just past the base of the stairs, the rocking chair sat motionless. For a brief second, relief flickered, until she realized it wasn't empty. A figure slouched in the chair, shrouded in shadow, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as though broken. Emily's knees weakened, but instinct kept her clutching Lily tighter, shielding her daughter with her own body. The figure didn't move. It only sat there, as though it had always been part of the house, waiting for her to notice. Her eyes adjusted just enough to pick out faint details, long arms that draped too far over the chair's edges, and hair, dark and matted, hanging in clumps that swayed as though in a breeze that wasn't there. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, praying she was imagining it. When she opened them, the figure was standing, the movement was impossibly fast. 1 second it was in the chair, the next it loomed halfway down the hall. Emily gasped, stumbling sideways. The figure stopped abruptly, its body twitching as if it were being pulled by invisible strings. Slowly, its head turned, though not naturally, more like a jerk, snapping too far to the side. A hiss escaped its lips, the sound distorted and metallic, like it was forcing itself through broken speakers. "She's not yours," it repeated, louder now, the words vibrating through the walls. Emily screamed, bolting down the hall toward the kitchen. She barely registered the cold tiles beneath her bare feet or the sharp corner of the counter she slammed into. All that mattered was putting distance between herself and the thing in the hallway. Lily cried against her chest, her little fists trembling, her screams mixing with Emily's frantic sobs. Behind her, she heard the figure's steps, slow, deliberate, yet echoing in ways that made it sound like dozens of feet were following her at once. Emily burst into the kitchen, her chest heaving with panic. She spun toward the back door, praying it would open where the front had not. Her trembling hands rattled the lock before wrenching it free. To her astonishment, the door swung wide with a violent creak, letting in a rush of frigid night air. Relief surged through her veins so suddenly it made her dizzy. She clutched Lily tighter and stepped outside, her bare feet sinking into the damp grass. For the first time that night, she felt a sliver of hope, the cool wind cut against her sweat-soaked skin as she ran across the yard. The neighborhood was quiet, the distant glow of streetlights casting faint halos along the sidewalk. She whispered frantically to herself, "It's over. It's over. We're out." She turned her eyes toward her car parked in the driveway, its metallic frame glinting faintly beneath the moonlight. Her shaking hand fumbled for the keys in her pocket, though she didn't remember grabbing them. She didn't care. Escape was just steps away, but then, Lily stopped crying. The silence was sudden, unnatural. Emily looked down, expecting to see her daughter's tear-streaked face pressed into her chest. Instead, her arms were empty. She gasped, stumbling backward, nearly collapsing on the grass. Her arms clawed desperately at her own body, as though she might have dropped Lily somehow without noticing. Panic twisted her gut, and she spun in circles, searching frantically. "Lily! Lily!" Her voice cracked, the sound tearing through the night like a wounded animal's cry. From inside the house, faint through the open kitchen door, came the sound of crying, Lily's crying. Emily froze. The wails grew louder, echoing through the house's walls, spilling into the night air like a cruel taunt. Her head spun. She knew she had carried her daughter out here. She had felt the weight, the warmth, the writhing sobs. Yet now, the baby's cries came from inside, as though she had never left the crib at all. Emily's vision blurred with tears. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, shaking her head violently. With every fiber of her being resisting, she turned back toward the house. The kitchen door gaped open like a mouth in the dark. Inside, the faint orange glow from the nursery pulsed against the walls, though she had turned off the light earlier. The crying grew sharper, louder, pulling her in. Emily took a step toward the threshold, her body trembling as if each movement required superhuman effort. She knew she was walking back into a nightmare. But Lily was in there. And there was no choice. Emily stepped cautiously back through the kitchen door, her chest hollow, her arms aching with the memory of holding Lily. The crying guided her forward, louder now, echoing down the hallway toward the nursery. The house smelled different, sharp and sour, like rotting wood after heavy rain. She shivered, each step sinking into an oppressive heaviness, as if the walls themselves leaned inward. Her bare feet slapped against the cold floor, every sound magnified until it felt like the house was listening. The monitor's static whispered faintly again, though she hadn't seen where it was. The sound seemed to crawl through the air, weaving around her head like invisible fingers. "Stay, stay," the familiar chant returned, but now it overlapped with something else. A distorted lullaby, just out of tune, played faintly in the background. It was a song Emily recognized, the one she used to hum when rocking Lily to sleep. But hearing it echoed back to her, twisted and metallic, made her stomach clench. She reached the bottom of the stairs, her body fighting itself. Every instinct screamed to run, to flee into the night and never return. But Lily's cries thundered from above, desperate, frantic. Emily forced her trembling legs to climb. Each step groaned as though the house itself resented her ascent. At the top, the hallway stretched longer than before, impossibly long, the nursery door at the end glowing faintly as if lit from within. Shadows slithered along the walls, moving out of sync with her body, twitching unnaturally as though they belonged to someone else. The crying suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was so sharp it made her ears ring. Emily froze mid-step, her heart hammering in her throat. Then, in the stillness, she heard it, a creak from behind her. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes wide and glassy. At the far end of the hall, where the stairs had been, stood the figure. Taller now, impossibly tall, its head brushing the ceiling. Its limbs dangled like wet rope, twitching and jerking with each faint movement. Though its face was shrouded in darkness, Emily could feel its gaze digging into her skin. The nursery door swung open on its own with a slow groan, releasing a wash of warm orange light. Inside, she glimpsed Lily's crib, and the tiny silhouette of her daughter lying still. Emily gasped and bolted forward, ignoring the figure behind her. The hallway stretched and warped around her, the floorboards vibrating under her feet, but she forced herself forward. As she crossed the threshold into the nursery, the door slammed shut behind her with a thunderous crack, sealing her inside. The nursery was suffocatingly warm, the air heavy and stagnant as though the room hadn't been opened in years. Emily's eyes darted instantly to the crib. Lily lay inside, silent, unmoving. For a horrifying moment, Emily thought her baby wasn't breathing. She rushed forward, leaning over the railing with trembling hands. Relief hit her like a tidal wave when she saw Lily's chest rise and fall, faint but steady. Emily reached down, scooping her daughter into her arms with a sob of pure desperation, but the moment Lily was against her chest, the atmosphere shifted. The rocking chair in the corner jolted violently, slamming against the floor with a crack that reverberated through the walls. Emily spun, clutching her baby close. The tall figure now filled the opposite side of the room, crouched low, its limbs folding in grotesque angles to fit beneath the ceiling. Its face, if it had one, was obscured by a curtain of dark, matted hair. The smell of damp earth and rust filled the nursery, choking her. The entity moved in bursts, twitching closer with each jerky lunge, its head cocking violently as it whispered in a distorted chorus of voices. "She's not yours, give her back." The voices overlapped, some deep and guttural, others eerily childlike. Emily backed against the wall, clutching Lily so tightly the baby began to fuss and cry. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she screamed, "She is mine. She's mine." The words tore from her throat raw, but the shadows seemed to recoil for only a fraction of a second. The entity tilted its head farther, bones, or something like them, cracking with the motion. Its long arms scraped across the floor as it lurched forward, stopping just short of the crib. The baby monitor on the dresser crackled back to life, blasting static that rose to an ear-splitting shriek. Over the noise came a voice so clear it froze Emily's blood. It was her own voice, distorted and echoing, "You can't protect her." Emily screamed in defiance, her body trembling, her legs threatening to buckle. She forced herself toward the door, clutching Lily with every ounce of strength left in her. But when she reached for the knob, the entity was suddenly there, blocking her way, towering, its presence filling every inch of the small nursery. Its hand rose, impossibly long fingers stretching toward Lily's face. The light flickered violently, shadows thrashing across the walls as the room itself seemed to bend under the weight of the E. The entity loomed over Emily, its fingers stretching closer, each movement making the walls shudder as if the house itself breathed with it. Emily pressed Lily tighter against her chest, her arms trembling under the weight of fear. She could smell it now, damp soil, iron, and something old, like forgotten graves. Its whisper clawed at her ears, "She's not yours," the words coiled in her mind, threatening to unravel her. But then Lily cried out, a raw, piercing sound that cut through the static, through the whisper, through everything. Something inside Emily snapped. A surge of determination coursed through her, fierce and primal. She wasn't just a terrified woman anymore, she was a mother. With a sob that rose into a scream, she grabbed the baby monitor from the dresser and hurled it at the figure with every ounce of strength she had left. The device exploded against its chest, showering the nursery in sparks and shards of plastic. The entity shrieked, a sound so shrill it shook the crib to its bolts, its form convulsing violently as though the monitor had been its tether. The lights flickered madly, the shadows thrashing like wild animals. Emily seized the moment, lunging for the door. This time, the knob turned under her hand. She wrenched it open and stumbled into the hallway, sprinting down the stairs barefoot, clutching Lily so tightly the baby's wails muffled against her chest. Behind her, the house groaned, walls rattling as though collapsing in on themselves. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She tore the front door open, the same door that had refused her before, and burst out into the night air. The cold stung her lungs, but she welcomed it, gulping it in as though it were salvation. The moment she crossed the threshold, the oppressive weight lifted. The whispers cut off, the static vanished. The house loomed behind her, silent now, every window dark. Emily staggered into the yard, dropping to her knees in the wet grass. She clutched Lily, rocking her fiercely, whispering broken words of comfort through gasping breaths. "I've got you, you're safe. I've got you." When she finally looked up, the house stood still and quiet under the moonlight. Nothing stirred in the windows. No shadow lingered in the doorway. For the first time all night, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary home. And yet, as Emily rose shakily to her feet and carried Lily toward the street, she couldn't shake the final, chilling thought: the entity hadn't been banished. It had only been broken, waiting for the next time the monitor flickered to life.